Hi, my name is Jason Bryant. Today's date is October 4th, 2019. Today, my 10-minute topic for principles in strength and conditioning will be on the use of an athlete self-report measure. An athlete self-report measure is a paper or electronic tool in which an athlete records their responses. And this is used to help monitor an athlete's training and recovery status. Today I will explain that there is a variety of self-report measures that have been created, and I will discuss the research findings and possible practical applications for this. There are many different self-report measures varying from a 6 to 77 item questionnaire. In this presentation, I will be discussing recovery stress questionnaire for sport, multi-component training distress scale, and the training distress scale. There are many different athlete self-report measures that have been created by researchers and coaches, and many variations on those self-reports. The first one I'm going to go over is the recovery stress questionnaire for sport. It has 36 items, and they are grouped into 12 subscales with 3 different items in each. The first deals with stressors the athlete may encounter, which are general stress, social stress, and fatigue. The second one focuses on recovery, which includes somatic relaxation, general well-being, and sleep quality. The other 2 types of subscales become sport-specific. The first being sport stress such as disturbed breaks, emotional exhaustion, and injury. And the last one is about more fitness, personal accomplishment, and self-efficacy. Next is the multi-component training distress scale. The self-report measure consists of 22 items. The self-report has 6 factors that include depressed mood, perceived vigor, physical symptoms, sleep disturbances, perceived stress, and general fatigue. The final one that I'm going to cover is the training distress scale. This is a 19-item questionnaire that helps to determine the athlete's performance readiness. And the training distress scale has the athlete rate their symptoms of emotional, general fatigue, any concentration difficulties, physical discomfort, if they have any disturbances while they're sleeping, and if the athlete has any changes to their appetite. This is an example of the training distress scale, and here we have the symptoms listed on the left-hand column, and then across the top is their rating system. It's a 5-point scale, starting at 0 with not at all, and then 4 extreme amount. I took this from Grover et al. In 2014, where they used this 19-item self-report in their research, which I'll get into more a little later on. From these examples, it is pretty noticeable that there are many differences between self-reports. They vary in number of items that they ask, the format and organization of the items, where some group items together and some just list them out. However, there are similarities within each of the self-reports. They all address issues like fatigue, stress, physical elements, emotional qualities, and sleep patterns. There are many studies that support the use of self-report measures to help determine an athlete's level of fatigue and readiness to perform or continue their progression. This study done in 2014 included 3 studies, 2 of which were conducted using high-intensity interval training, one using a cycloergometer and another using swimming intervals. In these studies, the researchers created training distress by overloading the participants to a point where they could not perform to their baseline levels anymore. The decrease in performance was mirrored by the increase in scores of the self-report. The third study was done having swimmers fill out the self-report every other day during a competitive season. The self-report data was compared to the swimmers' times of their events during their competition, and it was found that the self-report mirrored the times achieved, and that the athletes that scored high on their distress scale had lower times during competition, and the athletes that had a lower distress scale performed better in their competition. This demonstrates a link between the training distress scale and the performance in competition, which shows that the training distress scale can be used as a measure of performance readiness. In another study done in 2010, it explored the relationship between the inflammatory responses and multiple component training distress scale. The researchers used rowers in this study, and they compared the results of blood work they took to look at the inflammatory responses and compared that to the results of the self-report the athletes filled out. Not only did they find that there was a significant relationship overall in the results between the self-report and the inflammatory markers, but they also found that there were specific self-report measures and specific inflammatory markers that correlated with each other and kind of mirrored each other. Three studies were done in 2016 to view the relationship between training load and heart rate and the recovery stress questionnaire for sport. This study concluded that the recovery stress questionnaire for sport seemed to be a good indicator of training in athletes after comparing the results of the report to the training load and heart rate variability of the athletes. The effectiveness of both recovery stress questionnaire and the multi-component training distress scale was investigated in 2016, where swimmers participated in training sessions and then completed the self-reports. Both the recovery stress questionnaire for sport and the multi-component training distress scale demonstrated the ability to predict athletic performance changes. They found correlations between the self-report and many performance variables, as in swimming speed and endurance. Power was measured by a counter movement vertical jump test, and even flexibility. Some of the practical applications I found during my research are that the shorter self-reports can potentially be used on a daily basis, as they are quicker to complete. This could also help monitor the response to training and allow coaches to alter training as needed, such as increasing load or volume or intensity, depending on where the athlete should be in that time of training. On the other side, they can reduce training if the athlete is fatigued beyond where they should be during that time of training by lowering their training. Longer and more in-depth questionnaires, like the 77 item self-report, can be used at the beginning and end of a training cycle, so they can be used less often, but maybe have a little bit more in-depth feedback from the athletes. The self-reports do have a certain level of bias, however. An athlete must be truthful and unbiased when they're filling them out, when they're completing these self-reports, because it is possible for the athlete to rate themselves as less fatigued than they actually are, in fear that maybe they'll miss playing time, or maybe they don't want their training to be reduced. The athlete can also lie on the other end and say that they are more fatigued in hopes that their training will be reduced, so they won't have to train as hard or as much. Overall, the self-report measures may be able to help coaches, trainers, and athletes monitor the athlete's training status to prevent overreaching, overtraining, or to show performance readiness. Thank you.